they're back home, and Andy she is no longer at the club that she was at because that she had built up because the guy ran out of money because he undercapitalized, and so she's been club hopping and going from club to club to club, and so she ends up with the hottest night at the hottest club in New York. It was the hottest night. She's a promoter, but the night has waned, and so they bring her in to pump up the night again. And she does that, and then they start taking credit for it and saying, oh, it's just because we have this cool club. So that's where we are now. Okay. We were spending the weekend at Cookie and Size. Oh, that's her parents. Her parents. We were spending the weekend at Cookie and Size Beach House on the Bay when I took the test. In the quiet of the early morning light, I stole away to the bathroom, anxiously conducting my experiment. There was no grace to my actions. I always sucked at science. Missing the target almost completely, I barely had enough to continue. The few moments waiting for the results were interminable. We'd only stopped being careful that month. What were the odds? Yet I felt funny and had a sort of hormonal smell discernible only to me. I was just 4 days late, but in those days, I was never late. Those were the fucking days. There was no denying the big blue plus sign once it began to appear. As it got darker and darker, my heart raced faster and faster. It was barely 6 on a Saturday morning. I couldn't contain it. It was too big. Running back to our room, I sat on the edge of the bed, staring, daring Lenny to wake up. Opening his eyes slowly at first, alarm crossed his face as he bolted upright. I held the white plastic thing. Simultaneously, Lenny looked shocked, thrilled, and petrified, exactly how I was feeling. We both started to scream. We could hear Cookie inside beginning to stir. Running to their room, I burst through the door, waving like an idiot. "Hello, Grandma!" Cookie joined in the screaming. Skimming across the bay on a wave runner that afternoon, queasiness consumed me. I wore it proudly, a badge of impending motherhood. The B-bar gig became a no-brainer. All the smoke, boozing, drugging, and staying up until dawn would no longer do. I was grateful the decision had been made for me. The following Wednesday, when the money dickering began, I walked. Lenny was cool about it. I don't think he minded having me away from the Rock Boys, my life now totally revolving around his. And neither did I. I was determined to make this marriage work. As if to confirm the direction our lives were taking, right around that time, Lenny discovered he'd forgotten about a little savings account of his. More than he made in a year, he'd lost track of it, and was completely shocked when the bank sent him a notice. Or so he feigned. Years later, he admitted that he'd kept it a secret prior to our marriage, fearing that I'd marry him for his money. It wasn't that much. Suddenly we were flush. Without my own ambitions to focus on, I put all of my energy into Lenny, his happiness, his libido, and his career. I was filling Len's head with all kinds of crazy notions about how successful he could be, how much more was possible. For the next few weeks, as the nausea escalated, so did my excitement. Adjusting to the idea of parenthood seemed as natural as the heaving I was doing on an almost hourly basis. Morning sickness? Who named it that? My gynecologist assured me that in 8 weeks it would surely pass. 8 weeks? Dr. Rubin had seen me through my waitressing days, my stand-up career, albeit swift, and my rock years. We were friends. As friendly as a woman can be with a doctor who examines her down there. I'd waited on him, entertained him, and he'd been a guest at our wedding. He was genuinely invested in our impending baby. When I was about 6 weeks along, Saul booked Lenny on a cruise to Jamaica. A full-time housewife, I was free to accompany him. On my first cruise, Lenny had suggested I take meclizine as soon as we boarded the ship. I never had a moment of discomfort. There was no discernible side effects, so I didn't even realize it was working. There was no sleepiness, no dizziness. I felt completely normal and chalked it up to being one of the lucky ones who doesn't get seasick, not giving the drug any power at all. Pregnant, I felt seasick all the time. Most of my day was spent on the floor of the John. The rest of, it's nice, the shit and the puke, it's nice. The rest of the time, I was in bed, munching on pretzels and drinking Coke. I didn't need motion to wreak havoc on me. My hormones were doing just fine, thank you very much. Add movement to the mix, and I was completely transfixed, unable to speak, much less think. We'd flown down to Miami to catch the ship. The flight should have tipped me off. I was about to spend 7 days on a giant vomit machine. What was I thinking? As soon as we got off the elevator to our floor, I knew I was in trouble. I was in the early stage of pregnancy where almost all smells are offensive, some insanely so. Coffee maniac that I'd always been, I hadn't had a cup of Joe in weeks, and I could no longer brew it for Lenny. I forced him to go into the bedroom to drink his morning cup. I was not very nice. I was crazy. A constant state of nausea could break anyone. Our cabin was right above the kitchen. There was an omnipresent odor of cooking food because no one ever stops eating on a cruise ship. We had a lovely porthole, which I immediately covered, as the sight of the crashing waves was not helping one bit. As the ship pulled out of port, we went on deck to get some fresh air, and the cool breeze helped. The waters were calm, and for a while, so were my nerves. At dinner time the first night, we hit choppy seas. It was bad for everyone, but for me, it was torture. Just the smell of dinner had me reeling. I took one taste, and it was one too many. Racing back to the room, I heaved for an hour. We really are killing them today. Poor Lenny didn't know what to do. He set out on a quest for help, returning with sea bands. They were these little contraptions worn on the wrist with tight plastic bumps that massaged the pressure points, and I had instant relief. I was saved. After a day at sea, we stopped in Ocho Rios, Jamaica. We headed out in hopes of hiring a car and a driver to show us around. The town was a bit frightening, a collection of crudely constructed shacks filling with under-earning, over-eager locals swarming tourists for a quick hustle. Everyone had something to sell. As Lenny approached a line of taxis, 3 drivers lunged for the fare. One wore a smile. How much do you want to, how much, sir? How much do you want to spend? Lenny and I looked at each other. Tell you what, for $70, I don't have a Jamaican accent, so just imagine one here. For $70, I'll take you around for 3 hours and show you everything. Deal? Deal. Welcome to Jamaica, Mon. My name is Tyrell, and I'm going to show you a good time today. He held open the back door, which was hanging by a hinge. I slid across the lumpy back seat of worn thin red leather, avoiding the numerous exposed springs. As he pulled out of the lot, we flew into the air. The suspension was shot, as was just about everything else in the car. And despite the lack of luxury, though, there was something fun about the amusement park effect. We sat back to enjoy the ride. Quickly, we were out of the city. How about some ganja, Mon? Tyrell asked, looking at us in the rearview mirror, smiling and sure. Lenny peeked at me with hangdog eyes. Why not, man? We're in Jamaica. I shook my head and pursed my lips in disapproval. Tyrell had already lit the joint and was passing it to me. Oh. No, thanks. You take it, Lenny. Come on, Andy, take a hit. You know I can't. It sure smelled good. What's one little hit gonna do? Come on, just this once, Lenny said as he took a deep drag. I watched him instantly relax as he began to smoke. It sure smelled good. What's one little hit gonna do? Come on, come on! After they passed the joint back and forth a couple more times, it didn't take much coaxing when Lenny asked again. Come on, Andy, just one little hit. Rationalizing that marijuana was used to fight nausea, I figured it was medicinal. Prescribed by Dr. Tyrell. I took the joint, held it, admired it, and smelled it, gingerly putting it to my lips. Having gone that far, I dragged long and hard. It tasted like nothing I'd ever inhaled before, earthy and strong. Holding the smoke in as long as I could stand it, I exhaled slowly, savoring every second. Now that I'd had a little, I was hungry for more. I allowed myself one more toke, a big one, and then relaxed into the lumpy seat. I'd quit smoking pot as soon as we decided to try to make a baby. Having not smoked in over 2 months, combined with the potency of the herb, I was very high indeed. Lenny was high. Tyrell was high. Giddy and grinning like idiots, we played tourists as Tyrell merrily pointed out the sights. Driving back to the ship, sated and happy, low in the back seat, more relaxed than I'd been in ages, Tyrell struck a match. "One more for the road, Mun." Lenny's eyes lit up like an airport runway at midnight. "Not for me, thanks," I said weakly, silently imploring Lenny not to tempt me by further imbibing. Tyrell passed the joint back. Lenny took it and then offered it to me. "I can't," I whined, not very convincingly. "Come on, your last time for 7.5 months. Go ahead," Lenny said. It sounded logical. Maybe just one little hit. We were about to board the squeeze machine. Maybe this would help me keep food down, which would be good for the baby. I took hold of the reefer, inhaling deeply. Why did he have to remind me that it was my last joint for 7.5 months? Longer with nursing. It was more likely to be my last hit for 1.5 years. Enduring a period of abstinence like that deserves one tiny little toke. Give me that thing. I was friggin' high, and we were about to reboard the ship. I didn't have my arsenal for de-reeferizing. No perfume, Visine, handy wipes, nothing. Complete paranoia set in. Lenny's eyes were completely bloodshot. Mine too? It would have been scary enough if we were just regular passengers, but Lenny was crew. They throw people in jail for less down there. Holy shit, Jamaican prison. As was custom, the entire hospitality staff was on deck welcoming the passengers. Where to go? What to do? We walked to a small stand on the side of the road and bought a lemon drink. Pouring it onto my hands, I ran the liquid over my arms, my face, and through my hair. Better to appear badly groomed than stoned. I'll never know if we fooled anybody because no one said a word. Later that evening, after a long nap, I awoke with a severe migraine. Unable to take medication, I only allowed myself Tylenol, which was like putting a Band-Aid on a gunshot wound. Smoke pure Jamaican weed, but don't take an Advil. Made perfect sense. I played Let's Make a Deal with God, swearing that if I got through my indiscretion without harming our baby, I'd never smoke again. Skipping dinner, I stayed in the cabin all night, bringing up whatever remained of lunch. Consumed by guilt and shame, I felt justifiably punished for my bad behavior. For the next week, I was in a constant state of headache. Dr. Rubin didn't seem concerned in the least, assuring me that it was a normal side effect of most pregnancies. It seemed every woman I mentioned it to had her own pregnancy headache story. What to expect when you're expecting had warned of them. My tummy continued to swell, and my morning sickness persisted around the clock. I chalked it up to another price of motherhood. In my 10th week, it was just about the time to hear a heartbeat with a stethoscope. Possible, probable, but not absolute. I was terribly disappointed when it didn't happen. Dr. Rubin assured me that it went that way sometimes. He was convinced that both mother and child were well, and so was I. I was already in maternity clothes and looked well past my almost 3 months. Must be a big one in there. My size and intuition screamed boy. I was scheduled to have an amniocentesis in my 16th week. With the increased risk of birth defects in women over 35, it was a no-brainer. But what would I do if the news wasn't good? Other than worry, I had no answer. My life revolved around the baby. It was all I thought about, talked about, cared about, other than Lenny. It was a nauseating but blissful time. In my 14th week, I went back to Dr. Rubin for my monthly visit. I was enormous. The monthly sickness had finally abated. We laughed at my girth, chatting away as he began the examination. Stethoscope in ears, he was mid-sentence when he stopped. He moved the instrument around slowly at first, and then appeared to get a bit frantic. He'd turn it this way and that, finally stopping and composing himself into the confident doctor I knew and loved. I kind of suspected he was shook. Trying to poo-poo it, he said, "Look, the baby's sleeping. Must be around back." When he saw that gave me little comfort, he added, "You can go for an ultrasound, but I'm sure there's nothing to worry about. Your amnio's in 2 weeks. Why don't we just wait until then?" I already loved this baby so much. I just knew everything was going to be okay.
Oh, that's
You have to come back.